So, securing AI. Who's a cyber expert here? Like, who runs cyber within their organization? Okay, I've got one person over here. I mean, the excitement around AI and what it can bring to the future of effectively where we are today, I think it's quite exciting in my opinion. Now, there's obviously a lot of, security issues. There are some challenges at the infrastructure level. You've got to make a good decision around whether you want to do it hybrid or cloud or even on-prem. But as we start to realize that AI isn't just a static tool. So remember the old days where, and maybe some of you might remember it, but I remember working for a company called Sun Microsystems a long time ago. This is even before it became Oracle. You go and rack and stack your servers, you install the operating system, and away you go, right? Look at where we are now with AI, even any other machine learning tools that are out there today in the market. Everything is now what the industry considers based on microservices architecture, right? And what that also means is that a lot of organizations are now starting to think about Kubernetes as the underlying technology behind it. Imagine today that you had to go and run 100 services and someone told you, now we have to go and run 10,000 services through my Kubernetes environment. If it was an on-prem world, it means that you have to go and buy a lot of servers, probably a lot of storage, and a lot of networking kit just to go and support maybe a development effort or even a testing effort for your AI or machine learning application. What that also meant is that we needed to think a little bit differently in terms of how we actually go and provision infrastructure. Now, some of you here may be doing infrastructure, management. Some may be more involved on specifically around the AI side of things. But why are organizations adopting cloud? We all know the answer: scalability, agility, the automation, the APIs, and so forth. And with AI doing so much processing on the back end, the learning that it needs to do, the amount of compute power that it actually requires is phenomenal. Which brings me to my point around why we need to start looking at cloud security as a basis for your journey in developing, whether it's AI, maybe it's the next ChatGPT, perhaps it's the next, the next wave of what's to come in the healthcare industry or the finance industry. I know there's another panel discussion after this around AI ops and so forth as well. And hence why today I wanted to talk a little bit more around the importance and how you can guard, at least at the very basic level, of your cloud infrastructure as you continue to develop and grow new applications and technologies inside your organizations. The reality is, as we start to use more and more cloud, and again, even with the rise of AI, we realize that there are new types of attack vectors that are constantly being developed by those who are technically not authorized to our environments. Remember the old days where we used to protect the perimeter? We used to safeguard the servers, credentials, very important, of course. But as we start to onboard our journey in the cloud, things like identity and access management, even Kubernetes. Kubernetes has its own identity, it has its own namespaces, it also has its own containers that may be vulnerable, as an example. There are also the IAC component, where I'm not going to mention a specific vendor, but where we've seen potentially some providers being vulnerable, may actually cause some issues too, and may end up actually creating some sort of a honeypot inside your cloud environment. So when we start to think about the fact that as cloud becomes the norm for a lot of organizations in the journey of AI, we also need to recognize the fact that not one person is going to be able to understand everything around security, posture management, and even vulnerabilities. Unfortunately, that's the truth. I'm sure there's a lot of AWS practitioners here today. There's, I'm sure, a lot of Ali Cloud practitioners, Microsoft Azure and Google GCP. But again, I know much about AWS. It doesn't mean that I know everything about how Azure works. So what do we actually go and rush and do? We start to then go and buy all these tools, or maybe even use the open source ones, because we think they're a great idea in the first place, but we're only seeing the half side of the story. We're not seeing the overall picture around how well I am managing my cloud environment, how secure my cloud environment is, and if anybody knows the term impact radius. So when we talk about impact radius, we're talking about if something was compromised, what would be the end result to my organization? Am I going to end up as a data breach? Am I going to end up as a ransomware? What does that look like to me? So in the cyber world, we generally refer that as an impact radius. So understanding all of that and making sure that the security teams and the engineering teams are working closely together to either close that loop and/or you want to reduce that attack surface becomes a very important topic that we seem to be forgetting about as we continue to develop and mature our cloud journey through AI, or with AI, I'm sorry. So when we talk about business challenges, and again, coming back to that whole note around, well, the security people need certain things. The engineering teams need certain components too. The security teams generally are the ones who are getting audited. They're the ones on the front line getting told by the Prudential Regulatory Authority in the UK, maybe it's MAS in Singapore, you know, there's obviously authorities here in Hong Kong too, and there's APRA in Australia and so forth. But they're the ones who are getting told by all of these various groups, hey, you are not secure. You are not meeting the right level of compliance standards, or you're only 80% there, and so forth. But then the engineering teams, what do they care about? They care about documentation, because that's what we do. I used to be a technical person, so mind you there, but we care about documentation. We want to know effectively where the problem is, how do I fix that problem, which means I need the right level of documentation. So when we put the two together, and again, coming back to my point around new attack vectors, we also understand that there is a shortage of expertise. We understand that the teams aren't really communicating with each other. We then come up with this whole strategy of, right, well, since we're not playing together anyway, let's go and do all these compliance checks and see if they meet the requirement. I mean, for those of you who work in the finance industry, you understand what compliance means, right? For those of you who work in hospitals, HIPAA, et cetera, Europe, there's GDPR, and obviously in Japan, there's My Data Plus, South Korea, Australia has its own breach laws or Data Breach Act and so forth. The reality is, we are so focused on ticking the boxes because that's what we think is enough to protect our cloud environments. And what ends up happening if you do that? Your logo then becomes the next target on the newspaper. I mean, it was great to see the Gigamon presentation just before around all the various data breaches. I can recall, anybody from Australia here? No? Okay. So I'm allowed to say whatever I'm allowed to say then. In Australia, we've had nearly 100 breaches over the last 2 years. 25 million people. I'm pretty sure everybody's record is in the dark web somewhere by now. But we've seen the same effect in Singapore. We've seen the same effect everywhere else globally. I'm not just talking in Australia specifically. We're seeing that everywhere because, again, if we were doing all of the necessary compliance checks alone, without really looking at the end-to-end visibility around your security posture, your vulnerabilities, your identities, and everything else that coexists inside the cloud, because it's not just the simple perimeter, you end up on this wall. And Gartner and everybody else agrees. 75% of security failures are resulted from inadequate management of identities. 80% of firms suffered identity-related breaches in the last 12 months, according to IDSA. So when your cloud looks something like this, and you're trying to figure out, where do I begin? Or worse, maybe it looks like this. Or maybe worse, it looks something like this. Then you couple that with Microsoft Azure, GCP, Ali Cloud, and all of the other clouds that exist. Where do you begin? Sure, I can go and submit my compliance report and just tick all the boxes and say, yeah, I'm 100% compliant. I mean, it's interesting. I was talking to a CISO recently at a very, very large global mining company who's a customer of ours as well. And he turned around and said to me, Frank, we're growing. We're still growing and growing. And in fact, now we're looking at adding some AI ops to the environment. I mean, mining companies, you would think they're very, very distant from technology, and that's what I thought too. But now they're starting to think about AI ops in the sense that, hey, we're doing some mining, we want to do some landscaping, we need to understand the geography, we need to understand all of these information. And in order for them to go and process that information, doing it by hand is not enough. So they're relying on tools to help them be more efficient on some of the mining strategies going forward. And the question from him was, well, Frank, we're growing, we're still employing more and more cloud, we're consuming more cloud than ever. My challenge right now is not necessarily ticking the boxes, but I want to make sure that things that are fixed stay fixed from a security perspective, whether that's identity, whether that's whatever it may be within the cloud. So how are you going to help me do that? And I went back and I said, I've got no idea. I'm going to have to talk to the sales engineer who's a lot more intelligent than I am. But the harsh reality of all of this is we're all on the same boat. It's not just him who's thinking about it. Yeah, there are processes, there are all these trainings that you can do to make sure that you're safeguarding as much as you can from human error. But again, I don't know how large your cloud and security teams are, but there's no one person who's going to understand everything to make sure that you're secure from a cloud infrastructure perspective. So I went back and I said, right, Mr. Customer, we're going to help you first and foremost, not just look at the problem at a very, very high level, but what we want to do is also look at all of these various issues and help you understand where you need to focus on first. Security starts with fixing things, not telling you that there is a security problem. I can tell someone, hey, there's about 10,000 security violations in your cloud environment. What good is it if I'm going to go and tell you? What good is it if I tell you that there is a problem, but I don't really give you sort of the guidance around what do you need to work on now versus how do you even fix it? So when we started onboarding this whole concept of CNAPP, which is a 5-letter acronym created by Gartner, what it means was that we needed to look at the overall security posture not just on a specific thing within the cloud or a specific resource in the cloud or a specific user in the cloud, but we needed to look at the overall aspect of vulnerabilities, identities, and so forth, and with a little sprinkle of, let's call it AI magic. I'm not saying we use AI, but let's just say there's a little bit of that algorithmic engine behind it. We're going to also help you understand what you need to work on first so we can help you streamline the remediation process within your cloud environments. So what that meant was we ended up creating a platform that contains all of these 6 components, which, again, 4-letter acronyms: CWPP, Cloud Workload Protection; CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management; CIEM for Cloud Infrastructure Entitlements Management, Kubernetes Security Posture Management, IAC, and so forth. Now, you don't have to remember these, because I can assure you that's not the point of this exercise. The point of the talk is all of these need to come together to really be able to provide the necessary security aspects that you require on your journey in terms of your AI. I mean, the theme today is about securing AI, right? And in order for you to do that much more effectively, you do need to look at all of those 6 components in parallel. Hence why some of our customers are looking at things like CIEM, the leading identity and entitlements management capability. Some of our customers are looking at the entire platform that is simple to use. Of course it is. And it needs to be as you're looking at multi-cloud environments. Some of our customers are looking at the dynamic risk assessment, the analysis that we do, the sprinkle of magic to give you the prioritization. It also helps you understand why we even flag that as a critical issue, as an example. And lastly, being able to help you understand how to actually go and remediate the issue. Whether you want to do that manually, whether you want to run that through your CI/CD pipeline or your automation tool, that's completely up to you. What we do want to do is be able to fit into your ecosystem and your workflows so that we become the least disruption to your entire company's operations. And with that, I have a couple of minutes left, and I thought it might be a good idea to kind of show you what the platform looks like, so you understand why we are in the market, why we are a leader, not only as a CNAPP vendor, but also as a CIEM platform, but more importantly, why it's important to not only look at a siloed view of your cloud environment, but you need to look at everything, including the vulnerabilities assessment, the ability to look at the identities, the ability to analyze effectively the impact radius. All of that must come together in your journey of securing AI. And with that, thank you. I'll leave the video up. Thank you very much.